Administration for providing us with those very details, namely a classified briefing provided yesterday afternoon. The security of our diplomats depends upon the host country. We're here today discussing whether we should have had 2 or 4 or maybe even 5 security personnel on site. It's by no means clear that that would not have simply led to more deceased security personnel. With the number of guns in Benghazi, the number of militias in Benghazi, it is by no means certain that even 5 of our finest security personnel could have been successful against this attack. We ultimately have to rely on the ambassador and people on the ground to know what is safe and what isn't, where to go, where not to go, when, and with what security. And ultimately, they have to realize there's some risk, and they show heroism every day in going to places where they know there is some risk. And we should not criticize them because what they thought was a small and manageable but still possibly deadly risk turns out to be an absolutely fatal one. There's a lot of discussion about whether additional assets should have been provided, but much of that discussion focuses on Tripoli rather than Benghazi. There was a drone in the area, but press reports state that it was an unmanned drone. Congress has a role here. The administration asked us for $1.6 billion for security. The House cut that by nearly 10% in negotiations with the Senate. It still ended up well below the administration request. Yet we cannot say that that particular congressional decision led directly to these results. There is all this discussion as to whether this was a carefully planned terrorist attack or an ad hoc mob whipped up by some recent reason to hate the United States. And I think much of our confusion relates to the idea of thinking it has to be all of one, all of the other. Newer press reports indicate that it was some of both. An attack that doesn't seem to be overly carefully planned, and ad hoc additions from an armed citizenry in Benghazi that includes those that hate us. And finally, these unfair attacks on Ambassador Susan Rice are simply wrong. She had to rely on the intelligence that was provided. I sat here while Colin Powell provided the intelligence that he had regarding weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Ultimately, State Department personnel have to rely on the intelligence reports they're given. And Susan Rice's integrity, capacity, and record are beyond question. There is no political reason for the administration to have characterized this attack one way or the other, and I yield back.
Thank you. We'll now hear from Mr. Royce, who is the chairman of the Subcommittee on Terrorism, Nonproliferation,